Well, hello and welcome to Curiosity, Not Judgment with Birga and Gary. And as you can tell, we are in two different locations. So I am coming to you from Albuquerque, where we both normally live, but Gary is far and away.
I'm in Tampa, Florida, not too far away in this big wide world that we live in these days. But we've got a project we're working out here in Tampa. And unfortunately, I brought some cold with us, so it's not as warm as we'd like, but all fun nonetheless.
Good. Well, we certainly wanted to be consistent with continuing to release episodes every Wednesday, which meant that we needed to record this by way of Zoom. And sometimes that's going to happen, and I trust that we'll have good connection and good conversation, even though we're screen to screen rather than face to face.
I think that will happen.
All right, so the last couple of weeks, we had the opportunity to talk with our friend and colleague, John Freisinger, and we're really talking about the art of the question. And he really helped us think through forming and posing questions, helping to use questions to kind of reset maybe a setting that needs to go in a different direction. If you've not yet got an opportunity to hear or see that, I certainly encourage you all to go back and review that. I think it was really, really good content. And so kind of picking up from there and moving forward, we want to make this more of a practical application type of an episode where we really address how do we make these things reasonable and practical in our lives. We can talk about them theoretically, but when you're in the middle of a meeting that's going sideways, when you are face to face with a teenager that's really escalated and heated, if you are having a spousal conflict, if you're having something that's happened with a neighbor, how do we begin to implement curiosity, not judgment, in a practical way so that we reset the tone, reset our thinking, and hopefully continue to be really intentional about relationship.
And you ended on relationship, which is exactly where it needs to be, because we all know that we act differently around different people. I know I do. I act differently if I feel safe, if I feel like I'm supported, if I feel like everybody in the room loves me. I act a certain way. If I think I'm trying to prove myself, I think if people are almost in adversarial positions, or I don't think that they know or trust me or like me or whatever yet, I sometimes go into like performance mode, like I have to prove that I am worthy of some attention or influence. And by the way, I don't like that performance, Gary. I'd much rather be in the comfortable, kind of more close to true, authentic self, Gary, and that's hard to do sometimes. And I find that when various speakers and authors have talked about carrying your own weather with you when you go places, right? It's rainy day versus sunny day. How do I act in those different environments, which is a similar thing to what we're talking about? How do you carry that weather with you? How do you carry that sense of calm, that sense of acceptance of self and others with you? I think a large part of engagement and the practice of curiosity, not judgment, comes from a comfort in situations that comes from a deeper sense of, you know what, I'm okay. My authentic self belongs in this situation. And the things that I have to say or think can be valid as long as I'm not trying to manipulate, as long as my agenda is and my motivations are for support and good challenge of folks, as opposed to cutting things down or getting my own way despite anybody else's feelings or thoughts. So I think it starts with, how do we stay in an environment or carry our own weather with us in situations where we don't feel as comfortable, where we don't feel as supported? How do we do that?
It's an interesting thing that you bring up. It made me instantly think of a Disney movie that recently got released. One of the characters in, I think it's Encanto, right? Based on her mood, the weather changes. And I have to say that I can probably see that to be true of myself. And I'm hoping that happens less and less as I mature and learn, and I'm on this quest to be curious. But I definitely know that, if you've had a bad day at work, you typically bring that home with you. If you've had a conflict at home before you leave to work, you bring it with you, right? Your little rainy cloud travels with you. But conversely, if you walk in the front door and you're bringing in nothing but sunshine, even if the dynamic in the house had been maybe a foul mood before you stepped in, you can really be instrumental in changing the mood, changing the tone. And so I think it just starts with like a purposeful attitude of, hey, I'm going to choose to leave this storm cloud that happened in this conflict. I'm going to choose to leave it here because I don't want to bring it home, or I don't want to bring it to work with me, or whatever the case may be.
Intentionality has a lot to do with it. But I know for myself, I can be very intentional, but then find myself in a situation where it turns back again. And I think that that's the key is, what can we do? What habits can we form? What uh, mnemonics can we remember? What things can we do that help break us out of some of the patterns that don't serve us?
Mm.
Some of the things that we find ourselves in situations where it's like, man, I could have handled that a lot better. Or, that's not who I am. What's going on there? I always come back to driving because, I don't drive who I am. I drive, I'm overly aggressive. I don't act like the generous person that I aspire to be. And I'm thinking, and what you said earlier about how you can have a positive effect on the situation. Boy, I tell you what, if you're one of those drivers that's letting people in and with a wave, that can have a ripple effect with strangers.
Sure.
In a brief interaction. Imagine what an intentional, an intentional good mood, or good moods slighting what an intentional positive attitude or living in the present or enjoy can do with a familial relationship of a spouse or a child. I mean, that can make all the difference in the world, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think we've all been there where you have the objective of putting on a happy face despite the storm cloud inside, and everyone around you knows that it's a facade. And so I think, going back to your point of, we need to really come up with some sort of a trick or a mnemonic or a something that helps us to actually have it be a transition rather than just a facade.
So one of the ways to do that is, and I don't, somebody much smarter than I'm sure told me to do this once, but I used to go into important meetings at Intel, where I worked as a young engineer, and I used to imagine the end of the meeting. I would imagine everybody standing up and looking at each other, pleased, and shaking hands and saying, "Wow, great meeting, good job, this is excellent. I really see a path forward." And I would just literally vision that. And sometimes I was going into situations where I knew I was going to get yelled at, I was going to get admonished, somebody was going to be disappointed with my performance or whatever. And I knew that wasn't the probable outcome. But I really believe that to the extent that I remembered to do that and did it ahead of time and visualized it, I think things were definitely better than they would have been.
Mm. I know that people will often hang something, a physical something, at their door, whether it be coming in or going out of their door, at work or at home. And it's that thing that you touch or you see on the way as you transition, that can serve as the reminder of, okay, it's time to start shifting the way that I'm thinking right now. And I think that is a practical thing that we could consider. And you can pick anything that appeals to you, right? Whether it's something that you tap on your way out the door, if it's just something that's hanging up nearby, whatever senses that you want to engage in order to trigger that thought change. But if you're not, in your normal routine, you're not leaving home or you're not leaving work, and you find yourself, frustrated at the post office, or you're in traffic, or you're somewhere, the visualizing a positive outcome may or may not work when somebody's just cut you off on the freeway, and it may or may not work when there's an altercation nearby that seems to want to suck you in. And so what are some thoughts about maybe even just a mind trick that we can do for ourselves when we're out of our normal sequence of events?
Well, I guess what first comes to mind, I've got a friend who taps on his steering wheel 3 times before reacting to anything that happens on the road, which I think is a great, tap, tap, tap. By then, usually the rage has gone away and et cetera, and you've thought of a better thought. Um, but anything can work. Things that are with you all the time, whether it's a purse or a cell phone or a wallet, or your glasses, you could use as reminders. It doesn't necessarily need to be something physical as a transition on a doorknob. I'm just thinking it could be something that's with you in those situations or all situations. So I think that's a good one. I think another one is a way, because sometimes you say, okay, I know I should pause and think before I react, but now I'm just thinking of different ways to kill that person, right? Or I'm just thinking of different bad thoughts. Thinking of different, having a go-to that you can think of, like a beach scene that calms you down, or something like that as a go-to, or, an ABCs or a 1, 2, 3s of, what could I think about here in place of going down that road. I'm pretty successful when I'm intentional of wanting to stop a bad train of thought. I first have to think about stopping the bad train of thought. Then I have to think, what am I going to replace it with? Because nature abhors a vacuum, right? You can't just say, stop thinking of an elephant, stop thinking of an elephant, stop thinking of an elephant, right? We are all thinking of an elephant. So, what can I replace it with? And then there is sometimes when I go, no, I just want to be mad, right? I'm just gonna go with this. But at least you got a shot, right? And so that middle thing of what can we do to remember and replace with, what little thing can I remember that helps me to think about the situation so that I can approach it differently or change my behavior.
What visually just came to my mind's eye was as you were describing that is literally a traffic light, right? Red, yellow, green. So if you're in a situation where things are going, a direction you don't want them to go, the red is just stop for a minute.
Mhm.
Yellow really is clear the intersection, right? So how do we clear the space of all of the noise and the junk that's just gone on so that you can get to a point where green, is the go towards relationship, go towards, having a clear head and heart to hear and engage in conversation. And so for me, that's a good visual in my head, just to say, all right, we're gonna stop this train of thought because I'm going real quickly down judgment where I'm getting angry. I need to clear the intersection or clear your headspace, to allow for the green to go towards relationship and to go towards understanding.
I like that a lot. I'm going to start trying to use that because I think it's a great way to pause and visualize. And for me, visualizations are super important. I have to almost, as I think, I can almost see the thoughts, right?
Mhm.
And so a traffic light is a great way to do it. And that clear the intersection, my goodness, that's a great mnemonic because that's really what you have to do. You have to kind of clear the clutter. You have to get rid of the bad thoughts and then quickly replace them with good ones, but reminding yourself about relationship
Yeah.
and be creative and ideas and what can I replace this behavior with? Because if I'm just going to go down the path of trying to prove I'm right and you're wrong, if I'm just going to go down the path of killing you with data and making you cry, as engineers like to do, if I'm just going to go down a path of belittling you and trying to raise myself up, that's not a good path. It never ends well. I mean, even if we think we've won, we haven't. So how do we do that? How do we clear that and reset almost right in the middle of a conversation and say, you know what, I'm sorry, let's take a step back and start over or readdress this. And this, we're talking about things that are much easier to think about in a normal conversation, much harder to do in the heat of battle.
Sure.
But I mean, imagine if the world worked that way,
Mhm.
right? You're in the middle of a boxing match and ding, ding, ding. Okay, everybody go to your corner. And now we're going to take a break for a second and then come back.
Right.
I mean, the fighting may be just as intense, but at least you've had a chance to think, right?
Well, and I'm thinking too that just as in driving, everyone has their different response to a yellow light, right? You're going to have some people that are going to slam on the brakes. Some people are going to keep on going like they don't see anything that's changed. Some people that are going to floor it from, 100 yards back and try to beat the light. And so we all have that temperament, different temperaments, right? We're going to all respond differently. And so I think even just that notion of clearing the intersection of our mind is probably going to look different based on how you're wired.
Totally, and you make a good point. And I'm sure that sometimes we try things and they don't work. And the key, of course, is to try it more than once. And in different data sets and different situations, things may work and may not work. But you're right. You may be up against somebody who just loves the art of the fight. And you pause and say, hey, time out. Let's address this from a different way. And they may take advantage of that and just hit you harder, right? I mean, but at least I think that's part of the thing of, at least I did my part. At least I tried from my end to diffuse the situation or to figure out a different way to approach it. That's because it's not satisfactory to either one of us right now.
Yeah. We've been talking about getting angry and taking a step back from anger. And, the whole, again, notion of this podcast series or video series is to deal with judgment. But I think those two things are so closely intertwined that we often replace one word for the other. Because when we're in a position of judgment and the person with whom we're having the debate is staunch on their side, we're staunch on our side, I think it just naturally leads to anger, because I can't think of a time where, you've got two people locked in their judgment where they're not willing to budge or not willing to hear the other side, where it's like, oh, well, we're still best of friends. Let's part ways and kumbaya, right? I mean, we as people, we want to be heard. We want to be understood. And when we feel that somebody is at odds with our position, they don't get us, they don't understand us, somehow it inherently translates in our head to they don't value me or they don't care about my position. And so that anger really does start to rise up.
You just said a lot there, and separating the issue from the person, of course, is something that we've all learned in conflict management, because whenever you're taking a position that looks like you're attacking the person and not just their position, that's a big deal. This is the whole point about taking your position and setting it in the middle of the table and stop owning it personally, because it's both sides. The person who is attacking you may feel like they're attacking you when they're just attacking your position. You are going to feel like you're being attacked, even if that's not their intent. Is you're going to feel like they're attacking you as a person. The one that I see a lot, and I hesitate to say it seems to be increasing, but it does seem to be increasing, especially during COVID, is the whole you're not hearing me. I'm not heard. And whenever, I get this sense that someone's saying that, whether they're articulating it in those words, or if I can sense that they're just not feeling like they're being heard, I try, I'm not always good at this, and say, look, I've heard you, I just don't agree with you, or I've heard you, but I've got a different thought on this, or a different, decision or outcome from this discussion. And but I think there's a lot of people who equate hearing me with agreeing with me.
Yeah, and how do you disassociate those two things? How can somebody disagree with your position and it not compromise your value?
Exactly, because if there's oftentimes when I will argue or discuss something with somebody, and it has nothing to do with them. They're great as people, but I disagree with the position, and it doesn't mean I haven't heard you, and it doesn't mean that you're not valuable as a person. I've heard you. I think you're valuable as a person. I still disagree. That should be okay. I think that there are a lot of folks these days that have certain positions that have almost become part of them. Whereas if you disagree with this position, we can't be friends. Because if you disagree with this position, you disagree with everything I stand for. And I think that's unfortunate. I think it really shuts down discussion and dialogue and growth for a lot of people.
Yeah. I heard just a couple days ago, this guy telling a story that he was in a all men's barber shop and he was getting his hair cut, and he and his barber were talking about something that was political. And the customer that was in the chair next to him getting his haircut tells his barber, hey, tell the other barber to tell that guy to stop talking about that because it's making me uncomfortable. And the guy was pretty outraged. He's like, have we really become a society where you can't just tell me like, hey, you're making me uncomfortable with what you're saying? And better yet, like, why can't we hear things that make us uncomfortable to challenge our way of thinking? And he was very upset about it, but I was thinking through, and I think this fits right into what you were just suggesting. We've become so partnered or so married to our thought processes and our decision making that we can't separate the idea from kind of the core of who we are. And so if somebody disagrees, we see that as as an attack against our character.
It's really interesting because if you think about it, if we're saying that we have come to a position where if you disagree with me, then you are a certain kind of person, and then we become oil and water. We cannot mix. That's a pretty dangerous place to be. It makes it difficult to exchange ideas. I was with an old friend I haven't seen in years who's writing a book on complexity theory.
Mm.
And it was a very stimulating conversation for a couple of hours. My brain hurt at the end. But basically, he was saying that the issue is that we are so complex, and things are so complex around us. We don't have the full answer. We have a part of the answer,
Right.
and we're missing a very significant chunk. And the person that we're arguing with is in the same boat. They have a certain part of the solution. They don't have all of it, but we're taking these little kernels of things and disagreeing when neither one of us really understands the whole context and the whole picture. And I really found myself identifying with that, because I think that that's a large part of our issues. Are we take a little kernel of something.
Yeah.
We don't admit that we don't know everything about the context of what's going on, and yet we'll stand on that and say, this is my position, and if you disagree, well, then that means you are XYZ.
Yeah.
And I can't tolerate XYZ.
Well, and I hope we would be mindful to think about, examples of marriage, whether you personally are married or, somebody in a healthy marriage, that those people are often don't share the same views on many points, or they don't have the same personality aspects. And it is those differences in the safety of a loving, committed relationship that allows them to explore the ideas together in a place where they hopefully don't feel judged and don't feel compromised at their core for what they believe, because they know that they're safe. And so I think, we can't do anything about somebody else's response towards us, but we can always make sure that we are cultivating an atmosphere where we are trying to show an individual that we disagree with, like, hey, you're safe here. We're not seeing eye to eye, and we're definitely off on, the way that we feel about this particular belief, this value, but I still care about who you are. You can vocalize that, of course, but you can do it a lot with body language, with eye contact, with the whole 9 yards, about making that person feel safe, even when there's not agreement.
Or especially when there's not agreement.
Right.
Right. I mean, which is taking it to the good conclusion. And I think that's really key. There's a book called "Why Won't I Tell You Who I Really Am?" or something like that.
Mhm.
And the author's main point is that the only way human growth occurs is if you are completely honest with one person in your life, and that's the only way. That's the real telltale of true love, and it's the only way that you can grow as a person. And it's the old adage of oh, this person knows everything about me and likes me anyway, right? But this is you're completely honest with this person. You don't hold anything back. And those are the conversations that you can have with that person. That is really the only way we can grow, because everything else is a guarded mask, is a, I must argue to this point instead of being open that my point may be incomplete at minimum, or flat wrong, or even flat wrong against who I really am, which really gives us cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this is a good point for us to pause for this conversation, and we will rejoin, our audience next week, hopefully in person in town, in the same town. But as always, we want to just invite everyone just to respond through the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. There's a contact us option there. And we always love the feedback that we can get from you guys, whether you agree, disagree, somewhere in the middle, or again, just have a topic that you'd love to hear us discuss that maybe we haven't gotten to just yet. Please do use that Curiosity Not Judgment website for that function. So Gary, safe travels, or I guess have a good rest of your time in Florida, and then safe travels as you head home. And we'll see you all next week.
Take care till then.
Thanks. Bye-bye.